This is a common scenario I see with my couples. They come in, sit down on the couch, and proceed to explain how defensive each of their partner is. They want to talk about the latest fight or rupture and how their reaction was a response to their partner's reaction. They feel stuck, frustrated, exhausted, and often confused about what is happening. Why can't their partner see their positive intentions? And why are they so defensive all the time? It feels as if they can't trust their partner anymore, and their positive feelings about the relationship are at a tipping point and moving towards the negative. Now, we've talked a lot about cycles on this podcast, and for good reason. Many of the couples I see and know get caught in these negative cycles. Furthermore, the way that couples respond to these cycles not only perpetuates them, but also ensures that their trauma triggers stay activated and close to the surface. So their central nervous systems seem to always be on high alert because these cycles trigger their traumas, their past wounds, and so they're constantly in response and in their protection. So this is what we're going to talk about today, how reducing cycles actually rebuilds trust in the relationship. If negative cycles break trust down, then de-escalating those cycles should be able to rebuild it. And that's what we're going to focus in on. Welcome to Trauma-Free Relationship. I'm Tom Philp, your host. And as a therapist, I've spent over 10,000 hours helping couples work through their trauma so they can repair ruptures, heal their wounds, and communicate from a place of wholeness and connection. Let's get started. Okay, as we talked about in the opening, we're going to talk about negative cycles. If negative cycles breaks down trust, then when the couple learns how to de-escalate those cycles, then it should allow them to actually be able to rebuild that trust. But let's start with the basics. What is a negative cycle? What the heck am I even talking about here? So a negative cycle is just simply a pattern of behavior that both partners engage in when disconnected. It could be a misunderstanding, a rupture, large or small, or just not feeling on the same page about an issue. Either way, how each partner responds, which is usually through self-protection or defensiveness, actually increases and perpetuates the cycle. Let me say that again because that's really important. How each partner responds to that disconnection, which is usually with some form of self-protection or defensiveness, actually increases and perpetuates the cycle. Now, once the cycle is perpetuated, it has a huge downside because the messages that get sent in cycles actually trigger each partner. And these triggers are internalized models of the way we see ourselves, others, and the world. There are trauma triggers, for lack of a better term. Now, these are not necessarily the words that our partner is speaking, but rather the interpretation of our partner's words and the cycle that reinforces it. It's the way we misinterpret our partner's intentions because the cycle has come to dominate the majority of our interactions. So there's a huge downside to negative cycles. That is that when they start, they can send a negative message that triggers our own vulnerabilities, that triggers our own traumas. And in doing so, we begin to misperceive and misjudge our partner's intentions. And by moving into our protection, we actually perpetuate that negative cycle even more. So what are some of the negative messages that the cycle sends that actually gets triggered in each of us? So see if you can recognize any of these. These aren't necessarily the words your partner's saying, but these are what get triggered in each of us that trigger that negative self-concept, if you will, that negative internalized model from our past trauma that gets reinforced by the cycle. So here's some things that you might feel when these cycles take over. You're not good enough. You're too much. You're not worthy. You're stupid, lazy, no good. You failed again. You'll never measure up. Your feelings aren't important. You're not a priority. You'll never get it right. Now, these are just some of the more common ones I hear. I could probably go on, maybe even fill 2 pages worth of messages that the negative cycle sends. And so this is the huge downside to couples getting caught in negative cycles, is they get caught up in these messages that get sent that trigger our vulnerabilities and send us to a really bad place inside ourselves. Now, if this is the message that gets sent in negative cycles, why would anybody put down their guard? And the answer is they wouldn't. I get it. It makes sense to me. I'm asking you to put down your guard, to not be defensive, and you're looking at me like I'm crazy going, yeah, but I'm going to get emotionally hurt. Why would I do that? My partner's defensive all the time. They're the one that starts it. They don't ever understand that I'm the one that's trying to work really hard. I feel like I walk on eggshells. I censor myself. I don't feel like I can be myself. And another thing I hear a lot is couples say, I don't think my partner even likes me, which is just crushing to hear. I got to tell you, I just cringe inside when I hear that. This person that you love and care and have built a life with, in many cases, the cycle has sent you a message that I don't think they even like me as a person. And I get that as well. So why would you put down your guard if you're going to be emotionally hurt? And the answer is you wouldn't. You wouldn't put down your guard. And that's perfectly understandable. However, and this is a huge, huge however, vulnerability is the royal road to connection. You cannot reconnect with your partner unless you move out of your protection and embrace some kind of vulnerability. And unless one or both partners are willing to move out of their protection, and what this means for the anxious partner, that means they have to stop criticizing and blaming, and they have to look inward at their part. And for the avoidant partner, it means staying emotionally engaged and responsive to your partner and not shutting down. And unless one or both partners can begin to do that with some consistency, the cycle will persist. It will continue on. That's part of how it's perpetuated. One thing I always say is our protection perpetuates the cycle. Vulnerability leads to connection. So if the negative cycle increases mistrust, then learning how to de-escalate the cycle should rebuild trust. If it becomes emotionally safe for the couple to open up, express themselves, and be vulnerable, they can come to see how their partner can respond in a positive way with empathy and compassion for who they are, for their feelings, for whatever their concerns are. Then they can begin to de-escalate those cycles, and they can begin to rebuild trust with one another, which makes it easier to be vulnerable with one another. So at the heart of what I'm asking is I'm asking my couples to actually take a risk in being vulnerable. Without taking a risk, we stand no chance of de-escalating. Now, I understand the level of what I'm asking my couples to do. If you're listening to this and you're challenging yourself in like, how can I take that risk? It seems so hard. Believe me, these words don't measure up to the enormous task I'm asking you to do. But I have seen this thousands of times. And I know that unless one or both partners challenge themselves and begin to try to take that risk of being vulnerable with their partner, then they stay in their protection. And for good reason. Their body has learned that they have to protect themselves so they won't get hurt again. Those negative messages that trigger the past traumas sends their body on alert, and this is where they remain. And I get it. It makes sense to me. I'm sure you get it too. Conceptually, we all can get it. The question is, what can we do about it? And that is, we have to challenge ourselves to be able to take a risk and be vulnerable so that we might learn to de-escalate these cycles, which de-escalates the negative messages that get sent, which then allows us to rebuild trust. We can begin to interpret our partner's intentions for what they are, which is the longing to connect, because that's deep down what each partner really wants. Each partner wants to be heard, understood, loved, cared for, and feel connected. And so de-escalating those cycles allows us to rebuild that trust. So here are some tips on how to de-escalate those cycles. Here's just some things that I've seen over time can begin to really help learn how to de-escalate cycles and rebuild that trust. Number one, recognize when the cycle begins. If you don't know your cycle, if you can't articulate it to yourself, if you and your partner can't see it and be somewhat on the same page, it doesn't have to be a perfect one-to-one experience, but if both of you can't have some understanding and articulate that to each other, what that cycle looks like, then you can't even begin to de-escalate that cycle because you don't see it. All you know is that, okay, we did something again, and now I feel really bad after this fight or rupture that we've just had, but I still can't see it. So you have to learn to recognize what it looks like. You have to catch it early, and you have to begin to interrupt it every single time. So one of the ways you can begin to recognize your cycle is to begin to get more in touch with your body. Begin to notice. Your body is the first responders of your experience. So it's going to tell you immediately when a conversation takes a turn. It's going to tell you and respond immediately when that cycle begins, because you're going to feel a tinge in your stomach or a heaviness in your chest or a weight upon your shoulders or maybe just a general ache all over your body. But your body is going to respond. It's going to have a little trigger that says, here we go again. Uh-oh, this took a turn. I know where this is headed. You're going to have some sense of probably dread that my partner has just shut down and moved away. Once again, the signal being sent to me is my feelings, and I as a person am not important to my partner. Your body's going to respond, and it's going to respond to that signal that says, once again, you're not getting it right. You can't love your partner in a way that feels good for him or her. You're failing. Your body is going to respond. So being able to catch it early and interrupt it means you have to learn how to be in tune with your body. I've said this 1,000 times, and I'll probably say it 1,000 more times, and that's okay. Yoga, meditation, progressive relaxation, all of that is really important for being able to try to get in touch with our body so that we can begin to recognize those signals sooner, so that we can pay attention more to our experience of what's happening to us when it's happening. So the second thing is a slow startup. Let your partner know when you want to talk to them what you need from them, that you might need them just to listen for a few minutes so you can get everything out. And then you want to hear what they have to say. You might tell them that, hey, I haven't formulated exactly what I want to say, so give me a little grace here. It's going to come out kind of messy, and I don't mean it. And if my tone gets a little anxious, I don't mean it. It's just because I'm a little bit nervous and worked up. So if you could give me a little grace, a little space in this moment, I would really appreciate it as I try to formulate what I want to say to you. And so being able to have a slow startup and tell your partner what it is you need from them. I really need you just to be able to listen now for a few minutes. I really need you to be able to just give me a hug. Right now I'm feeling kind of sad. Or can you just sit with my feelings for a minute and not judge them or try to fix it? I really just need you to hear kind of what's going on with me. So having a slow startup means that not only you're asking your partner for what you might need in that moment, but you're also asking them to give you a little space and a little grace as you begin to talk about and sort out your feelings. Number 3, watch your tone. Let me say that again. Watch your tone. Watch your tone, watch your tone, watch your tone. Oftentimes, the initial trigger for both partners is a shift in tone. When we have an attachment figure like our partner is, a vast majority of communication is nonverbal. So they are hearing and responding way more to your tone than they are to your actual words. So when you come in, try to come in with a softer tone. Try to lower your voice. Try to speak slower. This will send a very different message to your partner than it might otherwise. If you come in a little bit defensive, already worked up, if you're coming in hot, a little bit angry, then this is going to send a way different message. So check your tone when you go into a conversation or when it begins to escalate. When you notice that, stop, shift your tone. Hey, wait a minute. Let's slow down for a second. I'm feeling myself getting triggered here, and I'm thinking we're maybe heading into another cycle, and I really want to be able to hear what you say and not get defensive and not shut down. So can we just slow this down for a second? And I'm going to try really hard to stay open and to hear what you have to say. Notice the softness of my tone. Notice how I slowed my speaking voice. That sends a very different message to your partner. Finally, tell your partner you're trying to be vulnerable with them and that you would appreciate their patience, that you would appreciate their understanding. Let it be known. Hey, wait a minute. I'm trying to be vulnerable with you here, and this is really hard for me. So I'd really love to have just a little bit of patience, as this is kind of new to me. This isn't always familiar territory. I don't like being vulnerable, but I'm taking a risk because I think you're worth the risk. And I really want us to be able to connect and not get caught in one of our cycles. So there are some ideas, some tips, some tricks, if you will, on how to be able to de-escalate and what that might look like and sound like in the moment with your partner. I really believe, and I have seen it hundreds and thousands of times, when a couple is able to move out of their protection and into their vulnerability, they begin to de-escalate their cycles, which sends messages that they can appreciate their partner's intentions and not misjudge them. And those negative messages begin to melt away. And what we begin to replace them with is positive messages. You're important. Your feelings are important. I care about you. You matter to me. You measure up. You're the one I want. You're the one I'm fighting for. And so those negative cycles that break down trust begin to build back up and begin to rebuild trust. Hey, thank you so much for listening today. As always, I really appreciate it. And let me know what you like, what you don't like, what you'd love to hear more of. I always appreciate your feedback. And until next time, we'll talk to you then.
Thank you for listening to Trauma-Free Relationship, a podcast for the healing of attachment trauma. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or our website at traumafreerelationship.com. Be sure to look for our next episode on your favorite streaming service.